There's a police academy marathon on the ice there.
I call this meeting to order for Tuesday, July 28, 2023. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Susan Payne,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dusty Wright,
Here.
Commissioner Sharon McDonald,
Here.
Commissioner Josh Reardon,
Here.
Commissioner Stephen Burnett,
Here.
Commissioner Carl Melton,
Here.
Commissioner Nick Paul,
Here.
Acting City Manager Stephanie Hernandez,
Here.
City Attorney Ashley Smith.
Here.
The clerk is present. Madam Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. We're going to start with the invocation. I'll go ahead and do the invocation, and then if we could, I'm sorry, and then the pledge will be led by Commissioner Melton. All right. Father God, we thank you so much for this day, Lord, another day that we can come and do the business of the city, Lord. We pray that we would have open minds, open hearts, Lord, and ears to hear, Lord, and that we would always act with the best intentions, Lord. We pray as we go through these few agenda items, Lord, that you would be the one, Lord, that would just lead us, guide us, direct us in all that we do and all that we say. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
Okay, we're going to start with the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Wright. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Melton. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and motion passes 7-0. We will move on to, we don't have anybody signed up for public comment. So we're going to move on to new business. Item number 1, consider and act upon approving tourism funding, and this is an item that's now an action item from Tuesday's meeting, and Acting City Manager Stephanie Hernandez has some information on that.
Yes, so this was basically what should have happened on Tuesday, but due to everything, I miscommunicated that. So in front of you have the contract. It spells out basically what was presented to you, the $20,000 ask, up to $15,000 in the first year, and then $5,000 in the next year. It has kind of laid out what our expectations are as far as the 2-year contract, that the City of Alamogordo will be the main sponsor, and the City of Alamogordo logo that will be on any advertisements going out. So the rest of it's pretty general, our general contracts. And I know Ed and group are here if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve item 1?
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Burnett. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner McDonald. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All those opposed, and motion passes 7-0. We want a good, listen, it's been a long day. What are we doing? A balloon? Yeah, we want that too. Whew, it has been a long day, trust me. Okay, we're going to move on to item 2 now. Consider and act upon Resolution 2023-35, approving the DFA quarterly report for the period ending June 30, 2023. And Evelyn Huff has some information on that. Hello.
Hey, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. So we are required every quarter to submit a quarterly financial report to DFA. However, for the fourth quarter of every fiscal year, DFA requires us to get a resolution, so to have you all approve the resolution. 2 of the documents that I sent out yesterday, one was the trial balance showing the revenues for the year, and the other was the trial balance showing the expenditures for the year. This is the information that we will send it to DFA as our fourth quarter report. So if you have any questions, we can talk about anything that is on that fourth quarter.
Does anybody have any questions?
Which tab is it? The DFA?
So it's the first and second one.
So it's the expense.
Well,
and
after
revenue?
the agenda.
So it's the expense one and the revenue one?
The
Okay.
expense one and the
Yes.
revenue one,
Okay.
correct.
Just had one quick question on page 2 of the expense one. The property tax admin fees, and then, obviously the state ones. Does the county charge us an admin fee for collecting and remitting the property tax to us as well?
That's the state admin fee,
It says here, property tax admin fee. Okay, so that actually goes to the state.
yes.
Okay,
Because the county submits it all to the state submits it back to us minus the admin fee.
okay. And then the 311,000 or whatever it is for the GRT admin fee.
Correct.
Okay.
Any more questions?
So with that money they charge us for basically nothing. So,
It's your state dollars at work. No? Okay, do I have a motion to approve item 2?
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner McDonald. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Reardon? Yeah. A motion, I'm sorry, a second from Commissioner Reardon. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Carl Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Reardon,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We're going to move on to item 3. Consider and act upon the approval of resolution number 2023-34, amending the preliminary FY 2023-2024 budget. Evelyn is up again. Sorry.
So, as you all know, you approved the preliminary FY24 budget in May. We send that to the state by May 31st, and then we're required to send what is labeled the final budget to the state by July 31st. This has the cash balances as of June 30th, which are updated, obviously, from the budget that you approve in May, since we don't have those cash balances. That's revision number 1. Revision number 2 is revising the salary and benefits. When we do the initial salary and benefit projection in May, obviously, we have people that come, we have people that go, salaries change, insurances change. A lot of times at that point, we also don't know what our workers' comp rate is yet. And so we always have a little bit of a reconciling entry. Revision 3 in the packet is all of the carryovers. So these are projects or purchase orders that are not completed in FY23. So we carry those projects over or those purchase orders over. And so we also then carry the budgets with them. So this was a money that was approved in FY23 but is actually now going to be spent in FY24. So that's a large revision. There are a couple little exceptions to the project and the purchase order. The Law Enforcement Protection Fund is one that gets carried
saw
over as
that,
well.
yeah.
If they have any sort of cash balance, then we carry that over. And then the same thing with the Fire Protection Fund. They, per the state fire marshal, are allowed to carry over all of their balances. So if they've got $10 in office supplies and they haven't spent it, they're allowed to carry it over to FY24 and spend that $10. Revision 4 is amending the contract in between the City of Alamogordo and Alamogordo Main Street to what the actual negotiated contract price was. Revision 5 is just to handle a refund that we got that was unexpected, the revenue and the expense. Revision 6 is to true up some numbers for the senior center. We will probably have to bring a correction to that. I think that there's a number that's incorrect there, but we'd already published it at this point. Revision 7 is to move some funding into the Community Affairs Division to do the city profile. That money had originally lived in the city manager's budget, so we're just trying some stuff up there. Revision 8 is to add funding to buy Placer software, which will help with economic development and tourism. And then Revision 9 is to add some funding in contract services to do some repairs and purchase some equipment for the Civic Center. They need some new carpet in one room and they need some new desks. And then Revision 10 is modifying the transfers in that we had originally had in the preliminary budget to account for any differences caused by the carryovers or any of the new stuff. So if you have any questions, or if there's any revision you want to talk about more in depth, we can certainly do that.
One quick question.
Sure.
With this pay raise that we just gave DPS, does this reflect?
That is not
In-
reflected here.
Okay.
Because we, at the time that we put this together, we had not calculated the tax revenue that we're going to have. So we will actually bring that to you in August.
Okay, how's that work since we can't implement that tax till January?
So
What do we do for the rest of this fiscal year?
So the rest of the fiscal year would come from the fund balance in 11,
Okay, until we can start actually
And-
collecting it?
until we start getting the revenue that will offset
Okay,
it.
because we gave those raises the 24th, correct?
Yes, the other option that there is the cannabis money is currently unbudgeted. So the commission could also vote to transfer in the cannabis money into the general fund to offset that difference, which I think is something we maybe had talked about.
Until the end of the year, until the tax kicks in?
Yeah.
So the cannabis is going to be used by the sign-on bonuses?
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which will still need to be transferred in, so.
No, we're probably okay, because by the time we get them hired and everything, and we start actually paying them, we'll probably be close to the end of the year. but-
Well, and we had a bunch of salary savings from the police that kind of fell
Yes.
back into the general fund, so that's why
Okay.
we were confident in putting it for.
Should balance out? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? I didn't make the 12 minutes, Commissioner Wright, I'm sorry. I tried. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve item 3?
Got one more quick
Oh,
question. I'll make a
Commissioner Reardon.
motion to approve it, and then if somebody seconds it, then I can ask my question. So motion to approve item 3.
Commissioner Reardon, do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner
And my
Milton?
other quick question was that the sidewalk revolving loan fund, didn't we do away with that a couple of budgets ago?
No, we've left it in place partially because of the CDBG project that's going on right now. It has actually kind of come back up in discussion.
Okay,
So we wanted to leave it there in case
somebody needed to use it.
somebody needs it.
Okay.
There have been some questions.
I mean, there's only 114, look, it says 114,000 in there, but
Yeah.
do you remember what we used to allocate? Was it 150 or 250 a year?
So I think initially it was allocated at 100,000 because I have not seen anywhere where it's been used.
I don't think it had ever been used.
Yeah.
How much is it to replace a sidewalk?
Just depends on how much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you
how
gotta
much it
do
is.
like a 60-foot lot and you gotta do all 60 feet of it, you're probably talking 10 or 12 grand, you know. It may even be more than that, I don't.
Debbie and I recently researched it. We pulled up the old policy, kind of looking at the old application, everything like that, because there have been some questions for the people who either did not qualify for the CDBG sidewalks or already had a sidewalk that could not be replaced by the CDBG program. That's an alternative that we can offer them.
And one other quick question.
That's okay.
Sorry. And this may be for a future meeting, but, the sidewalk revolving loan is to help people in the event that they can't afford to fix or do certain repairs. Is there any way that we could maybe look at setting up another fund such as that for some of these homes that may not need to be torn down, but do need to be repaired? Or we could have a solution for somebody that may only need $10,000 or $15,000 worth of repairs to their home, but,
So New Mexico MFA used to offer a program like that. So there could be a possibility that
Okay.
we
I just wanna put
could
that-
internally offer a program that was similar. I mean, it was called the Low Income Small Housing Repair Program.
okay,
And you could, I think it was up to $25,000.
yes, okay. I just want to put that idea in everybody's head, and we can talk about it later, but, okay, I'm done.
That's fine.
We're good.
No more questions?
There's a Police Academy marathon, I want to go home and watch it, so,
Oh,
everybody remember those movies from the 80s?
yes. It's what not to do.
Right.
Anyway, yes. Okay, so we had
Motion and second.
A motion and a second. So we had a motion from Commissioner Reardon, we had a second from Commissioner Melton. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Did everybody vote? Or did I miss that?
Waiting
Move
for you to call the
together?
roll.
Okay. Carl Melton,
Aye.
Nick Paul,
Aye.
Stephen Burnett,
Aye.
Josh Roden,
Aye.
Sharon McDonald,
Aye.
Dusty Wright,
Aye.
Susan Payne.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank
We're-
you, guys, and I promise next year we will not need a special meeting.
Hey, you know what? Life happens. Don't worry about it. Okay. We're going to move on to item 4, consider and act upon resolution 2023-33 requesting state officials to review the bond rules implemented in 2017 in response to the amendment of the State of New Mexico Constitution regarding bail for criminal offenders passed in 2016. And Stephanie Hernandez, our acting city manager, and Ashley Smith, our city attorney, have some information on that.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Commissioners. So as a result of Officer Ferguson's death, there's a lot of questions, concerns, and anger of how the process broke down. How was this individual on the streets? How did this happen to our officer? So as those conversations are happening, we are, as the commission, Ashley and I are reaching out to Scott Key and different people. Our next one is Cervantes up in Las Cruces. But there's a big picture on bail bond reform. And as we're discussing, that's like a long-term goal, but there are a lot of little things that can happen before we get there. And so what we found out is it's not necessarily bail bond reform that we can take on at this moment. And I have an update to the resolution that I'll go through in a minute. But what we found out is the individual that killed Officer Ferguson, he was on pretrial services. And he had a history, as we all have come to see, of escalating violence. Back in 2022, a House Bill 5 was introduced but never got anywhere. And that could have had an impact on what happened here, because there's some things that, and I'll let Ashley further discuss that, but if they would have passed this, there was some caveats in there that if he would have showed, if a suspect would have shown a weapon, then that could have been considered dangerous and he could have been kept in jail, which we all know that's exactly what happened back up in January. So the changes I want to make on the resolution to properly to properly represent what we're asking for is on the title, third sentence, where it says New Mexico Constitution regarding bail reform is conditions of release. So we want to start advocating so that all our senators, our representatives, whoever will listen to us, that they start looking at the conditions of release. On the second whereas, on June 16th, 2023, the alleged defendant was released on conditions of release set by the court and was ordered to be placed back on pretrial services. We want to add that in there. And then be it resolved to move bail bond reform laws and change that to pretrial services program and to revisit House Bill 5 from the 2022 legislation session. And the reason we're doing this is we just don't want to drop the conversation. We got so much support from everybody when this happened, and we don't want to lose that support. If they really want to support us, and we think there's some laws that we're not naive to believe that we're going to reduce the risk completely to our officers, but I think there's some steps that can be made to help, minimize some of that risk and get some of these more dangerous people off the street so they're not continuous problems for our law enforcement. And Ashley wants to talk a little bit about the pretrial services and what we're advocating for and how House Bill 5 could have helped in this situation.
So when we spoke to the district attorney, Scott Key, we were able to get a lot more information concerning the system and what we can do to try to make sure that people are held more accountable when they are on conditions of release. Because as you all know, as Steph said, the individual who committed the crime against Officer Ferguson, he was on conditions of release. He had he was on conditions of release on 2 different cases before this incident. And one of the things that he was placed on is what's called pretrial services. What that is it's kind of like probation before or while you're on conditions of release. So in theory, what's supposed to happen is the pretrial services coordinator is supposed to meet with the defendant, usually weekly. He's supposed to make sure that the defendant is abiding by the conditions of release, so making sure that they're not using drugs, alcohol, making sure, he doesn't have any firearms. They do random UAs, or urine analysis, to make sure there's no drug use. They're supposed to be checking on these people, making sure that they're abiding by any curfews that the court sets. And what we've discovered, from my own experience as a defense counsel, but also what Scott Key was saying from the points of the DA's office, is that pretrial services isn't quite working the way that we would want it to be because of lack of resources. They don't have, ankle monitors available to give to these people when they're out on conditions of release. They don't have enough people to actually go and check on these people who are on conditions of release to make sure that they're abiding by the curfews, or to make sure that they're staying in the places that they say they're living at. And so one of the things that when we spoke to Scott Key, that we all agreed that one of the things we could advocate for is getting those resources to pretrial services, so that pretrial services can make sure that people are abiding by their conditions of release. We agreed that, bail reform needs to happen, but we have to attack it strategically. Because the New Mexico Constitution was amended in 2016, and that's where the whole bail reform started. And we can't just go and attack the New Mexico Constitution. We have to go after and fix things that we can fix. And so this is one of the things that we can fix, is the pretrial services program, making it have more accountability, making sure that they're actually able to do their job appropriately. And one of the conversations that I will be having is that we will be having a meeting with the new pretrial services manager, to find out what his goals for the pretrial services are, and maybe what some things that we can advocate to help him as well. Additionally, as far as House Bill 5 goes, so House Bill 5 addresses what we call a detention hearing. House Bill 5, and the detention hearing is also what we call in the legal field 5409s. It's what we consider a dangerousness hearing, and where the state, currently the state has to prove that the individual is a danger to the community or an individual in the community, and that no conditions of release can guarantee safety. That is what the state has to prove at this moment when it comes to a detention hearing. The House Bill 5, that we would like legislature to reconsider, that's gone through the House twice, it would actually shift the burden from the state to having to prove that the person's a danger, to the person automatically being assumed that they are a danger based on certain circumstances, such as if the charges are first-degree murder, or second-degree felony human trafficking of a child, first-degree felony abuse of a child, sexual exploitation of a child constituting at least a second-degree felony, or a serious violent offense, which is outlined in state statutes. A case that has any of those charges, that person in a detention hearing would automatically be assumed that they were a danger if this House bill passed. Additionally, this House bill also says that, I have to find it, also mentions when a firearm is brandished. So it says a felony, another incidents where the person would be presumed to be a danger is when a felony offense occurred during which a firearm was brandished. And so that is where we say that this House bill, if it had been passed, could have prevented what happened to Officer Ferguson. Because the defendant in this case had brandished a firearm before. On the defendant's second case, he actually had brandished a firearm, pointed at himself, and was struggling with police officers with that firearm. Had the statute changed, had House Bill 5 actually passed, then that would have given the DA's office more of an argument for a detention hearing in that second case, and we might not have had the issues that we have now. What happened to Officer Ferguson might not have occurred. That is why we are asking, that's why we are asking in this resolution for the state senators, state representatives, attorney general, and the New Mexico governor to work with local attorneys and judges to review House Bill 5, to bring it back on the table, and to review pretrial services to make it stronger.
And just so everybody understands, Monday, I think we talked about that, there's a hearing on Monday.
So
And they literally have to go in there and argue that this man is dangerous and shouldn't be released. And this bill would prevent that argument, because I think we all know that he's dangerous and shouldn't be released, right? But they do have to go in there and they have to argue that in front of the judge. And with House Bill 5, they would not, if this had been in place, then they wouldn't have to go do that on Monday, or they wouldn't have had to do that because of his last incident. He did brandish a gun. It didn't matter why and so that's why this bill is so important. And that's why this resolution is so important, because there's no accountability right now for when these people are let out on pretrial services. There's no accountability right now. And we even said, when we met with Scott the other day, we said, well, how do you know if they're reoffending? If the pretrial services is such a breakdown and nobody's keeping track of these individuals that are in pretrial services or in the pretrial services program or whatever, how do you know? And he literally said he reads the activity sheets. And that's how he knows, or his office keeps an eye on the activity sheets, the same ones that we get. So that's how they know if somebody that has been released to pretrial services, that's how they know that they reoffended. And
Those are
that's
very
not,
vague.
it's not a
Very
very
vague.
effective way to keep an eye on somebody that's been released back into our community. I mean, we're all doing the same thing. We're reading the activity sheets, right? So that's why something like this is important, because it's twofold, really. This House Bill 5 has somewhat to do with bail reform in some ways, or at least looking at the conditions of release, but then also this resolution has to do with strengthening, once they have been released, strengthening the conditions on which they're released and making sure they're basically doing what they're supposed to. So it's all important.
Could y'all get us you said that they did a constitutional amendment in 2016?
Mm-hmm.
Could you get us what that amendment was? I'd like to read that.
I thought, did I not load it in there?
It may be, I already closed mine out. but-
I thought I loaded that in there.
I remember it very well.
But she
I
can-
see
Ashley
Commissioner
will give
Barella
you-
here, and I know she remembers it. It was
Ashley
a
can
huge deal back
Give you
then.
a breakdown of it, because her and I have gone over it. And I
But
just
I-
want to say that this is just this initial step. We expect to bring more resolutions so that we can inform commission, and as we get more information and steps that we can do, we plan on bringing those forward probably as a resolution as well, so that we can show this a unified message that this is our officer, this is your officer, that we expect the support to go beyond the services. So this is not going to be the end of these resolutions until we can at least see some progress, so.
Yeah, I just, you know, if they did it as a constitutional amendment and it changed this, I'd like to, because it has to go to a vote of the people.
Yes.
And it did, and
It
that's
did,
the
But it's the
important.
way they word it sometimes.
It's absolutely the way they word it, and that's what's
know.
really important for people to understand is, because you see a lot of people going, oh, it's this governor, or don't forget it was actually passed under this governor. No, it was actually passed by the people of the state of New Mexico. That's actually where if you want to call it a fault or a burden or whatever, that's where it lies. And I remember very well because the bail bondsmen were going around the entire state to basically lobby against that constitutional amendment. And, because they made it sound good, but boy, when you really started digging into it, so that, and I do think that that is important to point out. It was the voters of the state of New Mexico that voted for this, not, it wasn't a governor or a, you know, they might have signed it, the governor did sign it at the time, but that's what happened.
We'll send it out, but Ashley can break it down for you right now. Don't you have that?
Okay.
What do you?
Oh,
We don't
I
have to.
I have the statutes.
tonight.
She broke it down for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So-
don't have to tonight, no.
I mean,
Okay, we can send it to you with a little kind of brief
Yeah.
summary of what
Yeah.
the main points of it. That'll probably be easier.
That would be, I think, you know, a resolution's just almost as good as the paper it's written on, but, you know, if we could start lobbying these guys to take a look at that. and-
Yeah, that, and
Make
that's,
the wording of it sound just as good as they did in 2016, but to go back the other
and
way.
that's like, that's in the end goal, really,
No.
but there's a lot of steps to get there. And so this is
Yes.
kind of like those first steps. And then, like, I'm glad Commissioner Varela is here, because the next step is also to kind of present to the county commission so that they can get on board, because, you know, this is in their county too. So that's
Well,
like,
we have a
next
joint
step.
meeting with them. That might be something we talk
yeah, and
about with them.
that's one of the agenda items, actually, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think it's important that we show solidarity with this, because it affects our entire county, and this is the second time in less than 7 years that this has happened, so.
I mean, holding this guy in jail is common sense. You know what I mean? I don't know why, even the way the law reads, why they couldn't still hold him, because he is a danger to the community. You know, that's just,
well, I mean, if you want the answer to
So-
that.
well,
We have the answer to that, kind of, to where, how did he get out? And if you want that, Ashley could probably break it
well,
down
there
better
was,
than I can.
there was that gentleman that murdered that lady over off of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
He busted in the front door with an AR-15 and shot the boyfriend and her. And his attorney actually got him out on pretrial of
So-
some sort
So
for a
basically,
short period of time, and then they put him back in.
what happened on this one is the defense lawyer, or I guess the lawyers for the suspect, pretty much he wasn't a danger to anybody but himself. When he pulled the gun out up on Scenic, he wasn't aiming at the officers. He was basically trying to, I guess, shoot himself, and it got in a tussle with our officers. But go ahead and.
So, one of the issues, is he actually did not have a violent history, was one issue. The second one is, so his first case was an aggravated fleeing and a DWI, not considered violent. The second case, the charges that they cited him with are also not considered violent offenses. And so therefore, like I said, a dangerousness hearing is actually quite difficult, can be quite difficult for the state to prove. I know that because I've done many of those from the other side. It's a high burden to prove that the person is a danger to the community. And even if they found that he's a danger to the community, the question is there conditions of release that can guarantee safety? And it's actually, from a defense standpoint, there's a lot of arguments that you could make to show that they're not a danger to the community, and that's what happened here. The state did what's called a 5403, which means it's a violation of conditions of release hearing. It wasn't a dangerousness hearing. Basically, what they argued was that he had violated conditions of release by picking up a new charge or a new case. He was held on the 5403 for 3 months. This defense then did a motion to reconsider that 5403. 5403s are easier to overturn than 5409s, which So violating conditions of release is easier to reverse than if they're found to be a danger and being held on a detention. In this case, 3 months after the conditions of release hearing, there's another conditions of release hearing. Basically, he argued that he wasn't getting proper medical care, as well as other things. And at that time, because he had already been in jail for 3 months, the judge then decided to release him on that 5403. So that's actually what happened. 5409s, I always say they are stronger, and when the state can implement them, they hold the person longer because it's very hard to overturn them. But 5403s are quite easy, and the more time that passes when a person's on a 5403, the more likely it is to get overturned. I just know that from practice. And I will say too that, the state in that case really did argue hard against his release. There was no proof that he wasn't getting proper medical care. The state argued against it. The state did a great job trying to keep him in. At the end of the day, it's a discretionary, decision. And the law allowed for him to be released. There was nothing legally that we could really point to that mandated him to be incarcerated, unfortunately.
Which to me goes back to the bail reform, because he was released ROR, he had what incentive is there? It's like, here, get out of jail, we say that, we jokingly get out of jail free card. Well, that's exactly what it is. It's a get out of jail free card, and there was no incentive. And let's face it, if he had had bail, he may not have been able to bond out. He may not have been able to. So I still go back to my argument. He should have never been out on the street, so. Anyway, all right. Does anybody have any more questions on this?
Do we need to vote on that? or-
We do.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to make sure nobody had any more
Yeah, I have one
questions.
question. Going back
Yeah.
to lobbying, are we thinking hiring an outside lobbyist or sticking with city?
It's just us, by doing a uniform decision by the city, we're reaching out to people. Like I said, we're having individual meetings. I know as a commission, you guys will probably want to do that. We're not hiring anybody. This is more of us doing this to make sure that they know where the city stands and hopefully where the county stands, that they need to take a real hard look at this, because we'll have another one coming next meeting. But I think it's not so much as us paying somebody to do it, it's us just advocating and being on the same page and making sure that we all give what our expectations are. Instead of having 7 different messages, we're trying to get a uniform message so that maybe we can have some change and some impact on what can be done.
But big picture, someone is going to be talking to every committee member that bill is going to be in.
So we talked to Senator Burt today. The issue with the bill has not been in the House. It's been stopped by the judiciary, the Senate judiciary. And so what we're talking is, so we're going to meet with Cervantes to kind of find out concerns a little bit that he's had with this bill. Additionally, I know Scott Key, he's going to reach out to a lot of the DAs from around the state. And I'm going to try to reach out to some of the other attorneys as well, because if we can get a lot more of the attorneys on board with, either the House Bill 5 or a version of it, if we can find some kind of compromise to push through, we need a lot more attorney support in it. So that's where I have been involved in a lot of these meetings. I'm going to continue to be involved in a lot of these meetings, so that I can just help and I can find out, more of who we need to approach. Steph is also, Steph and I were divvying a lot of that up. She knows, she has some contacts for Cervantes, so she's going to reach out to him. I know Donnell Bryant, who's now the pretrial services manager. I'm reaching out to him so we can set a meeting up there. After we speak to Cervantes, then we're going to go out and I'll speak to a lot more of the attorneys and stuff. And so we are doing a lot of it in-house, just trying to gather a little bit more support. And then, we're trying to get some of the local legislatures on board and hopefully have them try to help us push this a little bit.
And then also, I just kind of ask that if any of you are having a meeting where you're discussing this, that Ashley be involved or I be involved, so we can, because Ashley has a real good background of the legal stuff, and just so we can keep it all, keep everybody informed on this. I think it's too important for, I think you should have conversations, but I think we all should just kind of know where we're all at. And so Ashley can break it down easy for all of us, and I kind of just ask that if you are going to reach out, that Ashley just kind of be involved, so we kind of just can keep you all informed and keep our resolutions up to date. And when we'll reach out to, I'm going to reach out to other city managers, because it doesn't just affect the city of Alamogordo, it affects every police department. So the more support we can get as we get closer to what we're trying to achieve, the better it's going to be.
And one thing too, I think we've seen that's helpful is, especially talking with Senator Burt, like a lot of the legislatures don't understand, like, especially the state statutes and how these things are being implemented. And so that's where, like Steph says, because I've done these hearings. I've seen how they act here firsthand. I've made the arguments myself. I've heard the judges when they made their ruling. It helps because I can really break it down for a lot of them too. So if they have questions, or if you're talking to someone and they don't understand, in the legislature, if they don't, how does a 5409 work? Feel free to tell them, hey, reach out to, I'm more than willing to tell them, this is how it works. This is how, we've seen it in practice. That's how it's going down here. And, today I explained, these are things that I would argue on conditions of release. These are all the things that I have advocated for clients. And so it helps legislature to realize that this is what's going on, and this is how it's being practiced,
I think the biggest thing is the public needs to be educated, and we're in a good position right now to do that, because there has been a spotlight, unfortunately, there's been a spotlight on Otero County once again for an officer being killed. And so I think right now we are in a good position to educate the public, because the general public does not understand bail reform or pretrial services. They just think that, people are just letting them out, or the police aren't doing their job, or I don't know, I've heard it all recently. And that's not true. And they need to understand, because the more we can educate the public, the more pressure can be applied in Santa Fe, which is what needs to happen right now. So we're in a good position to do it, and we need to keep the momentum while this, because, obviously we had this happen back in 2016, and, the ball kind of got dropped, unfortunately, but now we can see that this is critical. This is a critical thing right now, and we know it can happen, and it just happened again, and it's devastating. And I think we all feel the same way. We don't want to let this go. We want to make sure that everybody understands that if we're going to affect change, then it needs to start with our legislators, because they're the ones that have the power to do it. But we have the power to use our voice and collectively and get that message out and educate the public. They have got to understand why these things are happening, because there's just too many assumptions out there. And I think, like they said, we need to be organized and unified as not just a city, but as a city and county together. And we need to make sure that that we're educating people. People need to understand what is happening. So
The hard part too, though, about this next session is it's only a 30-day session.
I know.
So they basically only
and it's
do
5 months
budgetary.
away.
They only do budgetary, so we're looking at a year and 5 months before.
Right.
They're forming committees right now, so that's why we're trying to
Yeah.
get into the judiciary committee.
So if
with
it's a
Senate.
pressing issue, sometimes they'll add it, but,
And that was one of the questions we asked, how can we, because I think he said there was like 800 bills that went. Well, how can we push this to the top? And I think the best way to push this to the top is to have not just the city commission, not just the county commission, but to have senators and the representatives that, City of Las Cruces, all of that, to have all that support. I think that's the best way for us to raise it to the top and make it a priority, because they're not going to make it a priority unless we make them make it a priority, not just as the commission, but as citizens. So that's, I think, we're kind of doing that hard stance and trying to hurry up and get in with Cervantes and everybody that we can, basically.
All of these local, us in Otero County and like Doña Ana and Las Cruces, I think Las Cruces had an officer shot a couple weeks ago. We ought to see if we can't get everybody together and write a joint letter and send it to the governor's office and get her attention. I mean, she was there, so she knows it happened, and, because she can add that. She's the one, I think, that can really add that to the agenda
Honestly,
for session.
From everything we're gathering, there's a bipartisan support. The governor is supporting it. There's something in this bill that the lawyers don't like. And that's why we're trying to figure out what is it that they don't like, what can be fixed, how can we fix it. So I think if we just keep the momentum going, keep the conversation going, don't let this happen again to our officers or any officers. Like I said, we're not naive to think we can take away the risk, but I think we can help support them in taking steps to
At least try to minimize that,
And then, I mean, I think this is just a real, like, touchy situation or frustrating situation, angry, whatever, because when I was sitting with Chief Cunajero, I said, how many of your officers were here